Hello, I'm Cathy Park Hong. I'm giddy. I'm so giddy to launch the 2024 Spring Holloway Series. We have a fantastic lineup, but the first poet to launch our fabulous reading is our very own, well, not, I want to say it's our very own, but it's Roger Reeves, who Pedro and Camille will be introducing. But before Roger Reeves, Pedro will be reading too, which before I get to that, I want to just make a few announcements. So this lineup, we're gonna have a few more poets after Roger on March 14th. Jackie Wang will be reading at 6 o'clock, same space. Afterwards, Latasha Nevada Diggs will be reading on April 10th, 5:30 p.m. And then on April 17th, 5:30, our very own Tim Wood, who is a visiting poet, will be reading here. So it's a great lineup. So tonight, we are going to have two readings. The first poet is Pedro Javier Rolon. I seem to have trouble pausing when people are going. I have to figure that out. Okay. Pedro is reading. He is a PhD student in comparative lit at UC Berkeley. He also has gotten an MA in creative writing at UC Berkeley. He's graduating this year. And his poems have appeared in Berkeley's own Key magazine. He's from Puerto Rico, and I'm absolutely thrilled to hear Pedro's poetry. Please welcome Pedro Rolon.
Great. Hello. Is this on? Can you hear me? No, it's not, right? Maybe I don't need it.
The mic is charging.
Oh, is it? It's not this one here?
No, but please.
This one? Hello? Hello? It's...
I think the podium mic was better.
Is this thing on? No. Neither of them are working. That went all the way up. It's all good.
Just project.
I'll just project. All right. Thank you so much, Cathy, for your introduction. Thank you, everyone, for being here, kicking off Holloway with us. And thank you so much, Roger. It's so good to see you again. We're all so excited for your reading. I've prepared, trying to stay within the amount of time allotted. I have a few shorter poems and then kind of like a longer thing. I'll go into that in a second. But to begin with some of the shorter stuff, I want to start with a piece called Positioning Caguas to San Juan Expressway. Because a mind is the animal of a hunger, and because the word never makes bread, let me not tell you about the sea on fire, fulfill the need for a place of speech. Across four corners, beasts take shape. A life in cars multiplies territory occupied, whose commonwealth annihilated, the stride of a land along its own free length, attending the tropics like the astronaut. What are the bounds of real contact? The ghosts and the children and the sun in love with the tar and the men in trucks. To what scene could I owe myself? Sleeping in a calendar of rides, forming part of the moving window, wind and leeward roads to houses. All is glass in the velocity of work and days. There is no island here or there. Motion at Marshall's Beach. Under the gate gold rusting red and flanked by loose groups and the rocks deep behind the bare boys, what if we're seen from cars crossing above, or what about that armory where the fugue state girl in Vertigo sinks hair deep, and so what and so on, pretty thing. Come under the shadow of red and see them posing low-key Grecian looks out beyond the alleged Pacific. In the lithic patience, that's another thing entirely at edge with it. Or the sun arresting the motion of a nipple, or a western slope aerosol hushing the things that just go on in formations. Barely ashore, paving knees in a bruised hike along a suspended dawn of what happens when we people the rocks. Cruising the long continuity of geological and oceanic time, this water is not the other water, and nevertheless what's going on. El mar et la mar so crisscross. El mar et la mar both boy and girl-like, the way there. Down. This is a sonnet. By whose brave hand and where within the thick mess of overlapping wrists in club range should a light switch on, then off? Imagine the flat screen into which noise would then be turned and being turned on then be reduced. The party is only just repetitions of the capital night. Would we in dust diffuse across the planetary nose? I have a jam in my ear which wakes me that is not song but the dream to song wedded. What is all but possible to hum and just not knowing. Noon. Rain involves the red of a lizard abdomen with the window mesh and will not simply stop there, instead flaunting surface tension over the grid paper heavens, dragging a wet sunlight manifold as if devoting itself to the day the way a fly's eye would. Rain compounds the infinitesimal arrival of the sun folded, every time the hunger of a reptile braces itself, locked in on the ecstatic supper to be. At any moment, progression could deliver terminal messages. Water could violate the autonomy of blue and green, taking them to be itself, and the belly miss another meal. And so the rest of the stuff I've prepared today is part of a series that I've been working on that I've grouped under the loose title Miasma Greens, and so it deals with this colonial legacy of miasma as a history of bad air, particularly in Puerto Rico and the broader Caribbean region. And so you'll notice a set of mutations of that air form in volcanic ash and Saharan dust that makes its way into the Caribbean every so often, hurricanes, swamp, fumes, all that good stuff, finds its way into these poems that I'll read in sequence, and that's the rest of what I have for you this evening. So I'll begin with one titled Lung. From Soufriere Hill and Saharan gust of sand between dog and wicked wolf beheld. There's bad airs. They're crossing some lines, coming to embridle the number to the places given. Append the digit. From black biles of underwater cracks submerging the sung unity, islands do and don't repeat themselves. A hunt for breaths. Here with the asthmatic recall, 'cause day's a place for counting waves. While slipping into some vapors, muck language, serenely coming. So say miasma, tell it green, say there's bad airs, bad shit lungful. So say sea green, night go. Natural history. Filled a lung with thick green for the night again. Indolence is a humid night for smelling. A flower revealed to the nose rejects color in favor of the vision of holes in the abyssal skin open. Break off into the tongues. Muck the language. Aplatanamiento. Become the banana leaf or its fruit in heat. Back bent to the will of the day. Leaf so wet at night to refract various nights from the surface of the labor whose back bends to the tally of crop. Illumination beams forward and never otherwise. Flies compound the sight and are not caught. Some wet wisdom in the vermin time. What wisdom then stoned and begotten? Degeneration is a slow theory of lianas, blue and black and thick with water. Snakewood leaf, a homegrown dialectical snow of the equinox belt. The root bends to the sky. Rooted as in caused by earth rot, assembled on the run. Then We are the choir of disintegrations beside the green fuck chirping. Soil is peopled. Caves are birth in one story. In another story, there's bile, humus, and a burial for a legion of dociles. Submission of little throats cooking in the vapor. Platanera. The tamer storm winds do not spare the electrical fruit. The powerless eve after landfall gives us more stars. Look through the leaf to see that it is good and that fish swim in opposite directions, though they are bound to kiss in time. A heavy going back into the water, combust again and again. Are the islands still the curving dream of wet fire? What wisdom then in weeds you take to speak, the historic green, spit with will. And this is the last piece I'll be sharing. Thank you so much. Looking forward to Roger reading. It's called Towns. Do the tunnel walls trap the howl of a train that didn't finish the century? Never mind, we're moving. Now a giant face carved in the stone of the effaced Indian marks the beginning of a town named Isabela, Monumento al Indio, Madococama, Cara del Indio elsewhere. Vision happening along the car ride, speed and a still point conjoining as they do. Isabela Catholic, whose fading busts, now almost featureless, populate town squares all over, remarking the Holy Ghost that moved through a new world and walked the latitudinal waters, made landfall. Someone names a town one day, and then people sleep in it and mingle with stories, and then they go to other towns. There have been sleepers under the old light named. There have been fellow liminals, and they dreamed into the stars. Someone names a town, however. Who knows? I get ghost stories mixed up. In one story, the stone face moves as milky liquid treading the length of the wet snaking road. When I ask, no one knows who told me this. I must have dreamt the fugue of the face then. Another describes a disembodied hand holding a torch and hovering over the hilltops. I squint northwest, and an Atlantic makes night bluer beyond the mountain. Would spirit be defined by an integrity of body, or could the fluid pass in parts? What about a voice? One whispered my name, the same name of my father, given to me by my father. You catch ghosts in a glass of water. Carnations entice them. Was it an angel? What with a hum and outstretched lights took a seat on my neck one night, and my screaming was ash mingling with the glint within the black. What is a ghost without a mouth? Only shape is an occasion for doubt. Pictures worsen the matter. Ectoplasm, ser, corriente, mirror, blue middle of the flame. A plateau pursues a vertex, and go figure the rest. Poor body, a net for the various squalls. The mouth of a friend tries to breathe the storm into the hole where memory would otherwise pretend a gust of pale clarity. Windows shut global ears wide opening and lent to the air. Lexicon beast hurricane refraction of the green gods. Outside we do not know what moves. Enter history windward, event by way of sound, mouth to common mouth. It was a train, the morning unseen railing, from one place to another place between the forms given and those windswept visible as a grating against. Holy evil of the bad air salve and saint and sin, up and down the mountain roaring as it has and as it does. People wakeful to the night whose day broke with land falling. The morning is a train dragging greened centuries. I am telling you it was a train outside the boarded window. I am saying that memory sleeps under the vertical breezes. I am cupping the atmospheric ear. My very own asthma. My asthmic town, sea without a coast. Thank you.
Oh, he's out. Teamwork makes the dream work. Okay. Thank you, Pedro, for those poems. Hi, I'm Camille Santana Considine. It's my pleasure to introduce Roger Reeves. Roger's most recent book, Best Barbarian, begins dedicated to the risk of beauty. The poems frequently strike me as experiments in the use of memory and ritual incantation. This durational form is undergirded by an intensely citational practice. He writes with Gwendolyn Brooks, The Confessions of St. Augustine, Frank Stanford, Nathaniel Mackey, Alice and John Coltrane, Oya, Orisha of the Cemetery, and Outcast. The relationship between naming and visibility appears in his poems as a relationship to the epic tradition, in which Reeves shifts the act of naming from being a public catalog of the dead to an assertion that intimate privacy can still remain in public violence. In the end of Ghassan Kanafani, Reeves riffs on a response Ghassan Kananafi, a writer and political leader for the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, gave in 1970 when he was asked why the Popular Front didn't sit down with Israeli leaders. Kanafani responded that the conversation was not only futile, but impossible, because, quote, that is the kind of conversation between the sword and the neck. The poem stages a dialogue in which Kanafani asks, quote, what are you loyal to other than death? To which the speaker replies, to you, the dead, and what is not dead in your death. Life becomes, quote, what rots the senator's teeth, but also the children at the gates of the city, asking us to break the city. Many of his poems look for methods besides pain to make the other visible. One of these methods is the lyric, its ongoingness, its resistance to mimesis. In After Death, Roger begins with a version of what I think is his Ars Poetica, to get the light, quote, to get the light and dead coming through the window without distinguishing one from the other. The insistence on conjunction without distinction produces a sense of mutuality that's grounded in the unreachable. And this is not a source of anxiety, but of graceful resistance and embrace of that which exceeds language, and it works to transfigure what we might be able to imagine politically. This excess sometimes becomes ecstasy, a form of, quote, love beyond desire, something that insists, quote, upon itself in the middle of the wound, the break. In a 2022 interview, Reeves said that growing up in a Pentecostal church made him, quote, very aware of nouns and the performance of language, the performative utterance. His lines often carry a trace of this glossolalia, of the spirit sweeping through you, of speaking in tongues as a devotional practice. In Grendel, the book's opening poem, Reeves listens to James Baldwin sing Precious Lord. Baldwin sings not in the fiery, roaring register of argument or essay, but in an exhausted one, as, quote, as weary as water broken over his scalp. This opens into speech as a shared form of breath, as manifold, and the ecstasy of possession. Roger Reeves is a poet and essayist from New Jersey. He's the author of Dark Days, Fugitive Essays, which was published by Grey Wolf Press in 2023, Best Barbarian, which was published by Norton in 2022, and was a finalist for the National Book Award, and King Me, which was published by Copper Canyon Press in 2013, and won the Penn Oakland Josephine Miles Literary Award. Reeves's honors include fellowships from Cave Canem, the National Endowment for the Arts, and the Poetry Foundation, as well as the 2023 Griffin Poetry Prize, a Whitting Award, and 2 pushcarts. He earned his PhD in the University of Texas at Austin, where he's currently an associate professor of English and creative writing. Please join me in welcoming Roger Reeves.
Grendel, all lions must lean into something other than a roar. James Baldwin, for instance, singing Precious Lord. His voice is weary as water broken over his scalp in a storefront sanctified church's baptismal pool all those years ago when he wanted to be somebody's child and on fire in that being. Lord, I want to be somebody's child and chosen water spilling over their scalp, water taking the shape of their longing, a deer diving into evening traffic in the furrow drawn in the air over the hood of the car, power, and wanting to be something alive and open. Lord, I want to be alive and open. A glimpse of power, the shuffle of a mother's hand over a sleeping child's forehead as if clearing the city's rust from its face, which we mostly are. A halo of rust, a glimpse of power. James Baldwin leaning into the word light, his voice jostling that single grain in his throat as if he might drop it or already has. I'm calling to that grain of light, to that gap between his teeth, where the many of us fatherless sleep and bear and be whatever darkness or leaping thing we can be. In James Baldwin's mouth, my difficult beauty, my weak and worn, my future as any number of angels, which is not unlike the beast Grendel coming out of the wild heaven into the hills and halls of the mead house at the harpist's call, with absolute prophecy in his breast and a desire for mercy, for a friend, an end to drifting in loneliness, and in that coming down out of the hills, out of the trees for once, bringing humans the best vision of themselves, which of course must be slaughtered. I want to thank first the Berkeley community for having me. It's great to be here. I read at the lunch poems, but this was during the pandemic, so I was just at my house. So I wasn't really here, but I was here. And I would be remiss if I didn't sort of talk about, I think one of the things that poetry has that's really beautiful is the relationships you make in it. Making good poems is awesome, but I had this, when I turned 40, I'm a little over 40 now, and I just had this epiphany that really, it's probably simple, but it meant something, which is, I was so glad for the relationships poetry had brought to me. And three of those people are in this room. Cathy has been with me since we met in Chicago at a reading that she gave at this little bar called Danny's. And it was this storied reading series. And I remember running up to her and be like, oh my God, I love this. And we just immediately connected. So anytime I'm in 50 to 100 miles of Cathy, I always try to see her. And I would not, this book would not have really happened without another friend of mine named Solmaz. We sent each other our work when we were trying to put it, and we were all right, you have to send me 10 poems, you have to send me 5, and it was just, she carried me through the pandemic in a lot of ways. And we met, I don't even know how many years ago. But again, I wouldn't be the poet I am without our conversations. I think about something Solmaz once said to me, which was absolutely brilliant, where she says, every stanza is an announcement of power. And I think about that, how that has so shaped my sense of the poem. So thank you so much for just being wonderful. And then Pedro, me and him met in the mountains of Mexico. on a wild little conference think tank thing. And it's wild to be here with y'all. So I just wanted to take a moment. And then new friend Forrest. We had to do something together, and we had to hold each other's hands through the fire. So it's just really amazing to be here and to meet with some of the students earlier. So I'm just gonna read some poems, you know what I mean? I think we're gonna have some questions afterwards. So yeah, let's just get to it. This is a necrastic poem. This poem's there's a painting at the University of Texas at Austin that's about it's 8 feet tall, 12 feet long, and it's of a Klan rally above a Western city. And I was asked to write about it when we acquired it at UT. And so this is Vincent Valdez's The City, and this poem's called Sovereign Silence or the City. Empathy will not end genocide. It won't even delay it. There, children running from napalm into the palm of our vision. Above the city, a Klan rally wounding all the light in what you cannot see. Here you expect another disaster, quartered and cracked, yoked and yellowed, flogged and rabid, translated into a gash or coffin, a prison notebook neutered of its nude rage, dick in its hand, uncensored memoir of the beaver pursued by trappers for the tincture in its testicles, and in order to keep whole, tears off his own testicles and runs. Even a rose needs an exit strategy without the paparazzi of having to explain, I woke up like this, I woke up like this, or worse, I was bought like this, I was bought and sold like this. Flawless, the dogs and daughters of disaster refuse to crinkle paper into tinkling roses, or revise fire in the bodies they lie beneath to escape a fire into anything else other than suffering. Not a badiya nor a inshallah, not a mama say nor a makusa, not a shinshallah damyata nor a Holy Ghost gospel stomp. The nightingale above the dead beaver in the bushes sings not of the hurricane beating the bamboo into noise, but of the death trapped inside its body, which is louder than any beauty, which is all the beauty ever known before and after genocide. Go out and retrieve your dying from this field you've not come to until now. After death. To get the light and dead coming through the window without distinguishing one from the other is the day with and without its mastery. Stumbling upon a dead deer in a neighbor's field, knowing it was left there for you, not as muse, but as memory, dropped, broken off. Death no longer concerned with the beast that once covered a field with the white breath of its longing, because the animal is beyond death, and death has no interest in what is beyond it. So now it's off to stare at the barely standing there drunk, swaying beneath two scythes hanging on two boards above his raised eyes. The afternoon drifting into doorways, death now in a pocket of pines, in the thick hair of a boy who turns a skunk over with a stick, watching the Christmas of its intestines steam in the snow. Death touching the boy where it is he will know him, beneath the arm, as if raising him up to this common understanding. Desire is everywhere in this field, even in me who is not in this field, but from my many windows watching the night's dark light fall and dwell in his falling, which sends me stumbling to my newborn's invisible breathing, wanting to ensure the invisible holds. My fig branch finger stretched beneath her nose, me wondering, what is beyond death? And what is this rage in darkness? And my father, what is he other than dead, rage, and so much light, and so much light? That's sort of an ekphrastic poem too. I became like obsessed with the work of Andrew Wyeth, and so several of those lines are actually just like Wyeth paintings, like the drunk swaying beneath two sides. That's actually a Andrew Wyeth painting. The sort of opening is an Andrew Wyeth painting. Like I just loved his work, and yeah, I just kind of became obsessed. So, you know, just a little behind the scenes. So we were talking in Solmaz's class. She's teaching a great class on method and form, thinking about poets who are writing essays and stuff. And one of the things that I became really interested in is thinking about sort of the poetics of the essay and how we can use sort of the gestures of the essay in poems, right? This is, we might say something like a Pope, Alexander Pope, or even someone like Frank Bedard does this sort of type of thinking. Even Bob Haas, does this sort of type of thinking in the work. So I became obsessed with, like, I don't know, also I get these little obsessions. St. Augustine, my Episcopalian friends think I need to get over this obsession. They say he's the reason we have sin, the reason sin matters so much in contemporary theology. But I was reading sort of, again, St. Augustine, and sort of thinking about playing with his memoir. And so this is one where I'm sort of playing with the memoir and the essay. It's called Into the West. It would seem clear that no one can call upon thee without knowing thee. Though Augustine writes of God here, notorious for his absence, he also could be speaking of desire, pleasure, the tick of snow against the dry leaves, which sends my daughter spinning on her heel, the sound of it, that, daddy, that. Sometimes the world, its loitering joy is just a that, an absence that calls, demonstrates its over there-ness, its being, but without a proper name, so a silence sounded, as when I enter the clearing I once begged for, you, at an instant, absolute and looking back at me, as if witnessing a calendar or road you've already passed through, so my face now, in whatever wolf, vulture, or golden horn of pleasure, a ticking of snow against the wet road, nameless, thee, where you've been and left the body of that being. So I hurry and press into your leaving like a leaf scuttling after the dream of itself, into the sharp wet of snow against the skin, on into the west, where desire and sometimes pleasure is a type of faith, what you call me to in this spilling, this motion of night, your hair loose in the water of your back. Your spine has become the eye you wish for me to see through, but I must close my two good eyes, which is the beginning of any apocalypse or rapture. Our daughter or the day, us touching the north and south of each other without compass or rose, this stumbling, a type of faith too, a seeing, but without the dependence on sight or some heavenly ruin as signal of an end. It was like the deer outside, gathering at the window, licking the cold glass to smoke. The end of Hassan Kanafani. Is this not a conversation between the sword and the neck? This bone flower elegy, this man who found his work on the road and lay down with it dead on the road, this piece, which is not a piece, but the neck after the sword, the bomb after blowing out all the windows of Hassan Kanafani's house, this blood in the driveway, his niece dead too, and his son banging his head against the house wall, the bone of his father, the ash gathering in his hair. Is grief not a conversation between a house and a head? This liberation still on the road, this man whose sorrow speaks of willingly, who leaves his coffin on the road, below the smoke over the sick moon. We have finally arrived at the end of the poem, the moon's sick. Kanafani standing at its edge, asking me, what are you loyal to other than death? Envoy. What are you loyal to other than death? To you the dead, and what is not dead in your death? And what is not dead in your death? The children at the gates of the city, asking us to break the city, to let the leopard in, and the horse, and the oak, and the grain of wheat, to tear the sky with its abundance. And when the bomb hidden in the basement of a church explodes, to weep and gnash and let the 4 dead girls who've been driven in and out of the poem by history and a bomb in the basement of a church, to haunt the plate of the nation, to travel in the husk and ears of corn going to market, to sit on the senators' plates, to hear in the corn taloned at the end of their forks the girls, to feel in the kernels digging into their gums the girls, to know the food in their mouths is the death of things. Life, it is at every window. It's what rots the senator's teeth. It's interesting for me, book, like it's on my second book of poems. And it's just very interesting the way, like, tonally you change with each poem. Like, you change with each book. You're just like, oh, this has a different tone. You have a different way of being in it. Like, I feel much less chatty in this book, in between the book. So this next poem is the title poem for this collection. And that's all I'll say. There might be more to say in the Q&A if people have questions, but that's all. Rich black or best barbarian. When our consent was against our will, as in it is said during slavery, Negro children were encumbrances, often advertised in evening papers as lagniappe, the petite largesse of luxury living, as in Scipio, baptized 1760, likely Negro boy, about a month old to be given away, into the sea, as in below the harbor near Edisto Island, Ebos swung low in their chariot of their calling to be carried home and walked on the bottom of water until handsome, homed, as in the way we lay, we mined a body of water, so died for the want of water, bearing this plow and flower, this bit in Scold's bridle, this muling leather, this blood loss, this goodbye gone, but one gone ain't always equivalent to another, as in all silences are not the same, as in all money ain't good money. Which silences are you responsible for? What gems have you jiggered into crows, cajoled to sing in the pines and pages of poetry magazines for a prize? As in there is no succinct definition of exile, as in black is the black ain't, as in everywhere the bucks went clattering, the police bristled in the way, as in form forgets fugitivity is the original human form, as in best put on your best barbarian, as in this gospel is large enough that anything can be said about me and you, your mama and your cousin too, rolling down the strip on Vogues, waking up slamming Cadillac doors, outcast and out of gas, the empire smiles in its guillotine in Gucci loafers, as if to say, I practice the abundance of zero. As in the world is always ending while someone is and ain't being born, as in motherfuck the weather, come and join the band of wild Negroes dancing the antelope and Holy Ghost in Gadsden, Gethsemane, and Georgia, as in leave the angel to his centuries of death, leave the police dog of our future in his heavy paws, below the whites only signs, and water fountains dreaming of bucks between his teeth, and a healthy 401k or Roth IRA to ease into old age, and the arthritis of chasing everywhere the bucks go clattering, as in the black and blur or the bright blur of black, as in the Negro must still be moving, which is the original cinematic motion of ghosts, gardens, and ex-slaves, as in address yourself only to freedom, to the seed, the forest, the swamp, the night, the rain, the river, the rat, the snake, the panther, the tree leaping in and out of its green breath. Past Barabbas. The funeral passed, and also I loved him, and also I him so loved past him. And so all funeral the past ran animal up to our lies. And so, lo, I loved any which him, the I him, the scandal animal of him hanging his newborn, 20 years past newborn, out of a moving car, the silence of the road sorrowing up, I didn't want to begin with music, the hack and rasp of shovels, the hiss of white chairs, tallying the fraudulence and broken hip of my uncle, already 5 days past Barabbas, the shekels spent on Hennessy, the account drained, thieved, drained, my father, 7 days in silence, God touching his weariness or not, like a hunter that comes upon a broken instrument in the woods, the thing made Pharaoh by its brokenness, so cautiously he attends to the gut and tender of it, his hand raising the neck from the leaves, running one finger across its throat, and listening for blood, or what blood remains howling. Wolf. This poem has lots of allusions, I will say that, but it's elusive in this sort of hip-hop sensibility. I'll give you one because I just, like, you may need this one, partly because I didn't say this. So, Jack Johnson, famous boxer, infamous for also dating and marrying white women. He was once asked by a reporter, right? This is the early 20th century, y'all, when it was like illegal, right? You know, it was illegal to be like, have interracial marriages up through the like 60s and 70s, I believe. But he was once asked by a reporter, why do white women love black men so much? And he had the best answer, which is because we eat cold eels and think distant thoughts. So when you hear that in a poem, that is not me. I wish I could have come up with that great answer. Future, from beyond the voice of God. What shall be done with the demand for more selfies? Selfies of the crow and the wheat knocking against the window. Selfies of my daughter hooting like an owl and beating the back of her cage, the back of her bones. Selfies of Wittgenstein's eyes settling on the back of a crow, which is the shadow of a boy delivering milk to the door of his mother, where language begins. Gertrude Stein over the Stambergasi eating saltfish and conch fritters with Aimé Césaire. More selfies of Negroes from Niger and New Orleans, blue-black and the blue-black buck and canter of summer, and Yves Saint Laurent glasses and pinafores of light pinned to the eyes. No church in the wild, but more selfies of Susie Asada buck dancing on balustrades near the nigger cemeteries, where the chariots swung so low, we just called them commas. We about to fuck up some commas, yeah. Gerrymander and Jack Johnson the shit out of shit. Why do white women love black men? Because we eat cold eels and think distant thoughts. Jack Johnson, we need more selfies. Selfies of Frederick Douglass's pen, removed from the gashes in his feet, and writing hot checks for Rolexes and rivers our bodies just can't cash. Wade in the water, children. We about to fuck up some trauma, yeah. Selfie and holler, yeah. Instagram at the ashram with Lil Weezy and Wardell Curry Jr., not senior, busting 3-pointers, yeah, on behalf of a local charity that sends mosquito nets to children in Africa, the Sudan, Niger, I don't know. Tiger, tiger, burning bright. Tiger, tiger hanging from the streetlight. Distant thought. I'm so in time, I'm out of time. So selfie, I'm healthy. I mean, I'm saying though, you know what I'm saying? So I'm gonna read 2 more poems. You know, you gotta give this is the time, right at the poetry reading where you can lock back in. You know, because, you know, it gets a little, you know, these poetry readings, you don't always have the propensity like we used to. All right. So this poem is the title of an album by Alice Coltrane called Journey to Sanchin-Nanda. Alice Coltrane, her harp fills in the cracks of me with gold. The Japanese call it kintsugi, where the vessel broken only gold will permit its healing, its history. It's how the stars understand us. Lemon flowers on the skin of the earth, mosquito filled with the blood that sirens its fat, long life. Who isn't dying to leave this house, to go masked only in the shadow of one's animal breathing, lonesome, unprotected, knowing nothing lives as foreignness or death? That the black dog with the sword in his mouth, passing from house to house, will not bring its itch, It's ticks and locks clogging our lungs, a permanent quarantine. Nothing that a little gold melted to ichor and spilled into the veins won't seem. Everything is a blue divergence on a harp. The red bells in the purple crepe myrtle this morning, forgetting that soon they will be the corpses the spring tree kneels to observe. No, they remember. As everything dying remembers its mother's name. Say your mother's name, not for power, but for the glimpse of power. To be more than a hesitation, gold filling in the cracks, a window thrown open for no other reason than to continue a blue feeling. Nothing needed other than this devotion to darkness. A fire gotten brighter, my daughter holding my small name in her mouth, light broken, beloved, my daughter, a window thrown open, her voice, gold filling in the cracked basketball court of me, announcing all nature will be dead for life soon. You know, it's a really good thing to do is when you're writing a poem and you think you might be using a friend's line, call your friend and ask your friend, is this line too close to, because I remember it. And so I had to do that with this poem with Somaz. So I was like, this line feels really close. Is this? She was like, no, you good. I was like, so thank you, Soul, for, if you know her work intimately, you might hear this moment. Children, listen. It turns out, however, I was deeply mistaken about the end of the world. The body in flames will not be the body in flames, but just a house fire ignored. The black sails of that solitary burning boat rubbing along the legs of lovers flung into a Roman sky by a carousel. The lovers, too sick in their love to notice a man drenched in fire on a porch, or a child aflame mistaken for a dog, mistaken for a child, running to tell of a bomb that did not knock before it entered in Gaza with its glad tidings of abundant joy. In Kashmir's, a god is weeping in a window, one golden hand raised above his head as if he slipped on the slick rag of the future. Our human kindnesses, unremarkable as the flies, rubbing their legs together while standing on a slice of cantaloupe. Children, you were never meant to be human. You must be the grass. You must grow wildly over the graves. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that incredible reading. So we have a little time for questions. So if anyone wants to start us off, just raise your hand and Roger will graciously answer them.
Yes.
What inspired you to bring popular culture into your poetry?
That's a great question. She asked, what inspired me to bring popular culture into my poetry? It's really interesting because for some reason we think popular culture has not always informed poems, right? And it's just not true. What it is whose popular culture gets to inform the poem, right? Whose popular culture gets to be thought of as retaining intellectual and aesthetic rigor, right? Like I always like to talk to my students about opera, right? Opera at one form was like soap opera, like it literally was like not rigorous work, or not always considered rigorous, right? Now we think of opera as this thing we dress up to and we must go to the theater, right? For me, it's not about popular culture. What it is, it's about source material. These are the things I'm attracted to in life. These are the things that carry some type of aesthetic or political weight to me, intellectual weight, right? So when I think of someone like Future, for instance. I quote, there's this rapper, Future, that has this, we're gonna fuck up some commas here, right? I think about like, for me, why that line matters is because I'm thinking about commas in relationship to the way black people came over on ships, huddled spoon fashion. So we came over as commas, right? So what might it mean to turn that phrase on its head, right? Whereas before, fucking up commas means like, for Future, it's about like drugs into money, right? Flipping bricks, right? Whereas I'm thinking about it like, can we fuck up commas? Can we fuck up the way we think about blackness as a type of commodity, right? What if we think about it that way? Like Future has this song where he's like, everything's radical, right? It's on his first mixtape, and I've always been like, this is such an interesting declaration, right? So for me, I'm interacting with all these like popular, like Steph Curry, right? Like I think that he's a really, really interesting figure. I think Jack Johnson as a boxer, really, really interesting, right? So much of, I think, the greatest thinking that's happened in the 20th century in America happened on jazz bandstands, right? Some of the greatest feeling and thinking in America happens in our music, right? Of course I'm gonna be sort of attracted to that because I understand what type of sort of radical acts that are happening in that feeling. So to me, popular culture is just another place where thinking and feeling are happening, and I don't feel like it's outside of poetry. I don't.
I love that. I really enjoy how you wove not only popular culture now, because obviously a lot of us in the room that are younger in age are recognizing these artists that you're referencing, Beyonce, Jay-Z, and we're hearing you say lyrics that we've heard before, and then you're bringing up Frederick Douglass, and I just love how I do feel a lot of the time that poetry does have its own realm, where it is its own world, and I love how you incorporated all of that, so I just wanted to hear.
Thank you. I also think that like that juxtaposition I learned from like surrealists, right? Like I think about like Aimé Césaire, right? Like I think there's many ways that one can think about surrealism, right? And like to think about like Frederick Douglass, right, in relationship to a Rolex, right? And that, how do I say, that is not too far off, right? Like when we think about commodities. Right, and like luxuries. Like there was this thing called the luxury slave, right? Phyllis Wheatley was a luxury slave, right? Do we know who Phyllis Wheatley is? First black poet to write, right? She wasn't there to like work in the house. She was there to make the Wheatley. She was there as a way of showing off the Wheatley's intelligence and like intellectual largesse, right? So when I'm putting Douglas next to Rolexes and writing hot checks, I'm thinking about this sort of idea of luxury. Right? And the way that luxury has been sort of, and playing in the abjection of that luxury, right? Like, which I love about hip hop. Hip hop will be abject and be like, whatever, right? I love that aspect of it. Thank you.
Thank you.
A lot of us in the room today are actually in a class with Cathy about race and the avant-garde. So in that vein, I kind of wanted to ask, like, how you feel your poetry kind of works for and against its larger tradition. And like secondary question, just because I'm curious, I was wondering who your biggest musical influences are.
Okay. That's a great question. Oh, you know, how do I say? It's the first time that someone has ever used avant-garde near my poems, which I find very, very interesting. Not because I don't think of that, like I do think of myself as kind of like I love Fred Moten. Right? And I also love Robert Frost. Like I know those things seem like incommensurate, right? But I'm like, no, those are really interesting people in language, right? Like I want to be interesting in language. So I think the way I might answer your question is to think about like Aimé Césaire's Notebooks on the Return. I've been reading that obsessively since I was an undergraduate at Morehouse College, reading it in French, right? So there's Aimé Césaire, and I'm thinking about like Negritude, right? I'm thinking about like the Black Surrealist practice, right? And simultaneously, I'm also like, I really love Gwendolyn Brooks, right? And I really love Robert Hayden, right? To me, these things don't have to be contradictory. I think we can move in and out however we want to, right? Like I love, there's this avant-garde composer, black composer named Julius Eastman, whose work you should definitely check out, right? I think about Julius Eastman, right? Like in sort of that way. Like I think about how can we if we really think about what avant-garde really means, it just means like what's in front, right? We should be like always writing at the edge of ourselves. If we're always writing at the edge of ourselves, the edge of what we know, the edge of what we understand to be beautiful, we'll always be in some type of avant-garde. Right? Even if others don't consider you part of the thing. But we also don't, how do I say this? I don't know how useful that is in relationship to making work, right? Because I might make a book where, like, I use a lot of glossolalia, like, right? I might use a lot of, like, speaking in tongues, and then the next book could be, like, a book of, like, sestinas. Not that I would ever do a book of sestinas. But, you know, like, I would give myself the option to be many things, right? Because I am many things, right? Like, we are many things as writers. In terms of my favorite, I think the musician that was really, really important to writing this book was Alice Coltrane. I was listening to a lot of her spiritual stuff, as well as, I remember my first time ever hearing Alice Coltrane. I was an undergraduate. I was at Morehouse College in Atlanta. I was broke, and all I could afford sometimes was literally to turn on the radio and listen to the jazz station. And I turned it on, and I'll never forget, they played Journey to Sanchin-Dananda, and I was like, it was just like a revelation to me. And so her work, to me, I always return to her work. I turn to her sense of space and time, her sense of the elegy, right? Like Journey to Sanchin-Dananda is really an elegy to John Coltrane because he buys her the harp, right before he dies, because he thinks, oh, I think he would be an amazing harp player. And it doesn't like arrive until like after he dies. And so that whole album, like she has, like there's a poem entitled here where it's called Something About John Coltrane, right? And it's really an elegy and love song, and that's sort of what I'm playing with. So, long answer, but Alice Coltrane. All right, I saw a hand in the back. Yeah. Yes.
Okay. I could tell that you have a very deep appreciation for jazz, like even in the way that you write your poetry. To just now say that you have an appreciation for Coltrane. There was a line from, I believe the title was Future from Beyond, the Voice of God, where you say, tiger hanging from the street light. And I was wondering if that was at all related to They Feed They Tiger by Philip Levine, and the collaboration of that poem with the jazz artist, I forget what college it was from, but the collaboration album that they did off of that.
Yeah.
Because the They Feed They Lion is about Chicago riots and so on and so forth.
Well, actually, my illusion is the Blake. You know, Tiger, Tiger, burning bright, right? And what is also there is playing with the idea of like Tiger Woods, right? But I spell it Tiger, right? So that you know it's the Blake illusion, but you hear sonically, if you're going to hear, right? You're going to think, maybe some people may think Tiger Woods, and I'm thinking about the way in which sort of I like to take images out of, you know, all poets like this. We like to be in conversation with images and advance them in some form. You know, Stevens does this with Keats, right, in the Auroras of Autumn, right? And so one of the things I always think about is like taking an image and doing something that the original artist maybe never intended for it, which is to bring like Tiger Woods, a tiger hanging from a streetlight, which is also, you know, how they hung black people at times, right, from streetlights. So I'm using all this like connotative space, right, in that. So it's not Phil Levine, though I do know that poem. It's interesting that that's where you went, but it's Tyger. So I'm trying to use that sort of other spelling to point there. And did you have another set of questions? Was that the?
Well, the second question was if you would ever consider also doing like a jazz collaborative thing.
I have done. I have done. And in my first book, one of the poems was turned into a song by a Chicago jazz artist, and it was recorded. I've actually recorded with several bands as a poet, and also I'm on a friend of mine's newest album that gets released in a month. His name is Alex Chavez. Amazing player. So I wrote 2 or 3, maybe 5 of songs for him. And so I played piano growing up, played jazz piano. I still play the trumpet. I would love one day to do a solo album. But that would require me doing some other things. But yeah, I love working with musicians. I think it's great. I would love to work with dancers. That would be I would love to work with like an ensemble of dancers. I would love to like set poems to dance. All right, we're gonna, yeah.
You bring in a lot of citations in your work and a lot of other voices, and you also clearly have such a strong connection with music. So I was wondering, one, how do you make the choice of whose voice gets actual placement and space in your work alongside your voice? And with that, how does your relationship to sound and like the sound of voice and music influence how the poem turns out?
That's great. So she asked about the sound, right? How am I sort of thinking about putting sounds next to, putting the citations next to each other, right? One of the things I'm thinking about is, I'm really just trying to hear. Like, I'm just listening. Like, I hear a line, and I'm like, what's next? And I'm just trying to follow the sound. So one of the things you will see is, I wasn't aware that I had done something that somebody considered really, really crazy, which was, I have that in the future Beyond the Voice of Gods. I said, we're going to fuck up some commas, yeah. And I use that term, yeah, right? Like, we're going to do this, yeah, right? That comes out of New Orleans, right? That's a very Black sort of vernacular thing that somebody was like, no one ever does stuff like that in poems. And I hadn't even thought, like, for me, I'm just literally listening, right? And I just want to sort of allow the sounds to come. And so what's happening is like the way it's just also, like they say, a poem is just following the poet's mind. This is just, you're just hearing the way my mind works, right? Like, I'm not like, I will move from Douglas to, like, the poem's not working that way. All I'm doing is just like, oh, this thing associates or moves towards this thing, and I'm just trying to move the sounds around. And the citationality comes from, I think because I've like been in academia for so long, but also I've been a poet and I've watched poets not cite and sort of on the verge of plagiarism, appropriation, right? Like, what I'm trying to do is show, like, it's part of showing the process of the making, right? Like, I want us to be able to like sit with all these voices, right? And allow these voices to be sort of continuous, simultaneous, because all the voices are living inside me this way, and they're sort of living in the world this way, right? Maybe this is actually democracy. No, I'm just
Two more questions.
Two more questions. Yes.
So you read an ekphrastic poem, so I wonder what is your approach to ekphrasis, and also what are the special potential of like ekphrastic poetry for you?
Oh man, that's, whew. Okay, we gotta answer this in a short amount of time. So I think about what the ik in ekphrastic means, which is away, away from the frame, phrases frame. So I think that, like, I'm interested in the poem, or interested in the piece that I'm sort of interacting with, trying to use that as a way to get to something else, right? I'm not trying to recapitulate, like, I'm not trying to sort of repaint, redraw, resculpt the art object. I don't think we already have the art object. What I need to do is be in conversation with it and have the conversation that the object is asking me to have with it, right? So I think of it as getting away from the frame of the object to offer up another way of putting the object sort of in the world, right? And so I'm thinking of it in that fashion. And then your second question was?
What are the special potentials that a form of ekphrasis offers?
I think what it offers, I don't know if it's special, but it's another texture or material that one can use, that one can play with in the lyric, right? I think about someone like Frank Bedard, who I've mentioned earlier. Like, I'm teaching this course called Sequence Serialization in the Long Poem to my MFA students back at University of Texas. And one of the things we're looking at is the way in which Bedard will sort of have moments of like lyricism, and then he'll just move to an ekphrastic moment, and then that ekphrastic moment allows for a certain type of contemplative, meditative moment, and then he'll move back to the ekphrastic moment, right? Particularly in the first hour of the night, he does this. So I think that the potential is that what you get to do is bring the mind of the artist, the visual artist, and if you do your research or if you sort of understand, you get to use their thinking and then think beyond them, right? Or think, what is the last thought that they've had? Can I move it in another way? Or can I contradict? It's really a type of, it's a critical act, right? It's a critical endeavor, the ekphrastic poem, I think.
One more.
Sister, yeah.
I was really interested in your use of the word not. It seemed very loud to me in your poems. It's almost like you negate something and then there's a creation poem. So I was wondering about the space that negation plays within your creation of images.
Man, you must have been in the writing room with me today. I am thinking about negation quite a bit. Part of it is because the assertion of a thing sometimes then, how do I say? It's almost like can I give you something that's a weird answer to? Okay. So Andre 3000 said this of Features. He said, "It is the most negative, positive music I've ever heard." Right? And I thought, to me, that's what negation does. Right? It offers up a negative that you can create a positive out of, or it even, it allows for a thing not to be a thing and not to be another thing, which then opens up territories of sort of you doing the work of what then might be in between those two knots. Right? When I was doing my PhD, I was writing a lot on aporia as it related to race. And I think about aporia as this sort of space of the knot that is open, right? And again, we'll bring Aimé Césaire back into the room where he says, how do we begin the world, right? By destroying it, of course, right? The radical act, right, sometimes is the destruction in order for the creation of the next thing. So I see those knots, those absences as presences, right? They're offering up another way of imagining a presence, a there. Is that? Thank you. That's a great question, though. I love that question. Thank y'all. It's such a smart audience.
Roger Reeves' books are on sale in the back. There's a stand with a Pegasus bookseller, so please buy his books. And he'll sign it, hopefully.